Hurdle for mankind, Asia, where midnight came and went and humanity carried on. But the Mayans were from the Western Hemisphere. Maybe they were on New York time.
All right, here we are in Times Square, the place where humanity rings in New Year's to find out if it's our final year, our last few moments on Earth. ABC News has trusted me with this assignment, the potential scoop of all scoops. Not that anyone's going to be around to hand out any promotions, but the hour draws near, the moment of truth is here. There's the clock. 3, 2, 1, okay.
So much chatter, a fair amount of fear generated by that doomsday prediction based on the Mayan calendar. But it appeared to run out today, and ABC's John Mueller reports that we are all still here.
The evidence is clear. Ice shelves in the Antarctic breaking off into the ocean. Sea ice disappearing in the Arctic. The world's ice is melting at an alarming rate. According to British researchers this week, 60% faster than in the 90s.
The devastation in Haiti, a catastrophic 7.2 magnitude earthquake rocking that island nation. At this hour, hundreds are dead. The U.S. Geological Survey tells ABC News that number could rise to the tens of thousands. Today's quake more powerful than the one in 2010 that left an estimated 250,000 dead. And there is word of several aftershocks tonight of at least magnitude 5.
Now, as the heat wave gripping the Mediterranean continues, some countries are recording their highest temperatures in decades. Italy may just have recorded the hottest ever temperature in Europe, and the heat is only fanning the spread of wildfires in what has been a nightmare summer for many. Tanya Dendrinos reports.
It is unequivocal that human activities are responsible for climate change. That's the finding of a new study by the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It's the most up-to-date assessment of how global warming will change the world in the coming decades. Environmental experts have called it a massive wake-up call to governments to cut emissions. 234 authors from 66 countries have worked on the landmark assessment.
Taliban fighters behind the desk of the presidential palace. Taliban fighters have taken down the flag of Afghanistan inside the presidential palace. That flag has been rolled up.
Staging ground to evacuate U.S. Embassy personnel. Helicopters and airplanes circled over Kabul, shuttling between the embassy, where sensitive documents were burned, and the airport as the Taliban closed in. The militants had already taken every city except Kabul, mostly without fighting. U.S. trained and equipped Afghan soldiers just melted away. By early afternoon, the Taliban's advance got even stronger. They broke into Kabul's main jail, freed thousands of prisoners, and instantly added them to their ranks. Afghans saw what was coming. The American evacuation does not apply to the vast majority of Afghan citizens. I went to an office in a shopping mall packed with Afghans struggling to fill out the State Department's webpage for visa requests. Most people here worked for the U.S. military in minor roles, like cooks, cleaners, and guards. Afghans swarmed around me, thinking that as an American, perhaps I could help. They showed me documents proving their employment history.
So everyone showed up with their ID cards, pictures of their phone, other IDs, recommendation letters, employment contracts, and they're hoping that all this paperwork will be enough to get them a visa immediately so they can get out of this country.
Others came here because they're terrified of the Taliban and didn't know where else to go.
She doesn't have any connection to the U.S. She's just here out of desperation. She's saying, please, do something. Take my son.
Afghanistan was never supposed to have been nation building. It was never supposed to be creating a unified, centralized democracy. Our only vital national interest in Afghanistan remains today what it has always been, preventing a terrorist attack on American homeland. I've argued for many years that our mission should be narrowly focused on counterterrorism, not counterinsurgency or nation building. That's why I opposed the surge when it was proposed in 2009 when I was vice president. And that's why as president, I'm adamant we focus on the threats we face today in 2021, not yesterday's threats.
Tonight, devastation in western Haiti. That massive 7.2 earthquake leaving hundreds dead. In Lakai, a sign of hope as people pull a woman and a child from the rubble. Another man covered in dust carried out of what's left of this building. The injured treated in the open air. The country's hospitals stretched thin. The sheer destruction seemed everywhere you look. This hotel reduced to piles of debris, people believed to be inside. Rescuers cutting through concrete in search of survivors. The acting Prime Minister Ariel Henry declaring a state of emergency for a 1-month period. The quake striking 78 miles west of the capital of Port-au-Prince, just around 8:30 this morning. USGS predicting high casualties and widespread disaster for the Caribbean country already in turmoil. The quake along the same fault line of the catastrophic 7.0 in 2010 that killed an estimated 250,000 people, a disaster from which Haiti is still recovering.
This earthquake is larger than that earthquake.
The heat wave is being caused by an anticyclone nicknamed Lucifer that's moving up from Africa. It'll see a continued rise in temperatures over the coming days, with the Health Ministry issuing red alerts for extreme heat in a number of regions.
We've taken the governor's house and the police headquarters, say these men. Hundreds of thousands of Afghans are now refugees in their own country, fleeing the fighting or the brutality of Taliban rule.
People are living in fear.
It's causing the deaths of thousands of ordinary Afghans, thousands of ordinary Muslims. You're the ones who started the fighting here, though.
Shortly after the interview ends, the sound of helicopters. The Taliban are still vulnerable to government airstrikes.
Running for their lives, frantically trying to escape Afghanistan on this US military plane. This is how desperate some Afghans are to leave the country. A handful tragically clinging on even after takeoff, before falling to their deaths. Foreign nationals and some Afghans are being evacuated, but huge crowds gathered after rumours even those without visas could travel. Outside the airport, even more chaos. Taliban members firing in the air to assert their authority, trying to keep control. Despite the dangers, some residents still risking their lives to try and get inside. The group has promised an amnesty to those with links to the government, but many still fear they'll be targeted by the militants. Inside the airport, American forces fired into the air too.
And shops have been reduced to bricks and dust in the wake of the 7.2 magnitude earthquake. It's a reminder that man's efforts are no match for nature's power. The extent of the damage is still not known, and the head of Haiti's Civil Protection Agency told a press conference he couldn't say a specific number of people killed. Tonight, it's suggested that more than 200 have died. The epicenter of the earthquake is nearly 80 miles west of the capital, Port-au-Prince. But the whole country has been placed into a state of emergency. Today will feel all too familiar to some Haitians as the memories of the earthquake 11 years ago return. Then an estimated 250,000 people were killed, and the scars it left on Haiti have not fully healed. Once more, an earthquake that lasted seconds.
And experts say with climate change, that loss is unavoidable.
Fortunately for Canada's glaciers in the Rockies, it doesn't look bright in their future at all. It's likely that 85% to 100% of the ice is going to be lost by 2100.
PhD student Sam Anderson has researched the impact of melting glaciers on river systems in Alberta.
During the summertime,
global climate is one of the many stories knocked off the front pages by this pandemic, but even as the world economy stalls, it's still there. In a remarkable new Netflix film, David Attenborough has been looking back on his life and coming up with some possible ways to deal with the immense challenges facing the planet. It isn't all bad news. I talked to him and the World Wildlife Fund's Colin Butfield just before social distancing was introduced, and I asked Sir David about coronavirus, of course, but first he explained why he had agreed to make what he calls his own personal witness statement on climate change.